If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Columbine Conspiracy Podcast Series. This is episode 2, The Multiple Shooter Theory. And this theory has been around for quite a long time, and I am going to start off with the coincidence theorists and how they go about dismissing this theory outright without actual, honest, logical, objective, scientific investigation, without falling for any kind of logical fallacies, which is, of course, what Mindshock is known for. This was one of the most requested podcast series. We went over a lot in episode 1. So if you haven't checked out episode 1, make sure you check that out. We are going to be building off of that. And there is some truly mind-shocking information that is not only available now, but was available within just a few years of the Columbine shooting. And a lot of it's been swept under the rug. A lot of it is simply ignored, like multiple giant elephants in the room, just simply hallucinated to not exist to soothe the dissonance of the coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultists, those that don't have the mental capacity to objectively and honestly and logically look at information before jumping to assumptions and conclusions simply to go along with the official story. And how often in history is the official story true? A lot of questions and surprisingly few answers, but more than zero. There are certain answers. There are plenty. A lot of the coincidence theorists say, well, if there was multiple shooters, why aren't people still talking about it? Well, some of the Columbine survivors still are. They might not be getting mainstream coverage on the Idiot Box and various news and documentaries that seem to come out every anniversary, but some of them are writing books. Some of them are still speaking out in their own way. They're just not getting mainstream coverage because, for whatever reason, damaging to the establishment, a certain narrative has been spun, and people are just willing to have so much blind faith that this narrative is true. And we will be unraveling this narrative with, of course, logic and reason at the forefront. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, if you find it interesting, if you want to help support logic and reason in a world where it is quickly becoming extinct, you can donate to our PayPal, help support the Mindshock podcast. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. Like and share this podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. Just check the link in the description. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, so we are going to start off with the de facto coincidence theorist subreddit, which is simply the Columbine subreddit. It is a controlled subreddit, like so many are, with sham moderators who shut down any logical, objective analysis and inquiry. Anything that doesn't go along with the status quo, they shut down under the guise of being impolite or whatnot. This is a common thread in many subreddits. You see this in the Maura Murray case, even the JonBenet Ramsey case. It's becoming more prevalent as more and more podcasts coming out that are questioning more things instead of just taking on blind faith whatever the main narratives on the Idiot Box are. And that's threatening to the establishment. The authority-worshipping cultists just want to shut down any kind of scientific skepticism. They want everybody to go along, or they have neat little boxes, and you're allowed to question, but only within the boxes, and then that's what makes it look like there's actual free debate. So anything outside of these boxes that triggers these Dunning-Kruger goofs and coincidence theorists is simply shut down. And we will examine exactly how that is done from the beginning here. So this is a thread on the sham subreddit r/Columbine. Conspiracy theories. Hi, everyone. Are there any conspiracy theories about Columbine, and what are they? This particular one was posted 7 months ago. Most of them are filtered, but again, they do want to keep up the illusion that there's free and open debate. So right off the bat, the sham moderator Delta Delta Dawn has Sticky to comment right at the top, clearly establishing motive here. Just a reminder, keep it civil, everyone. This post was allowed to discuss the conspiracy theories and demonstrate how they have been debunked, which is a common thread among coincidence theorists. They hallucinate and pretend that all debunkings are legitimate, and there is no debunking of the debunking. And of course, clueless about all logical fallacies. This was not to have an open season on discussing actual case relevant theories that you may disagree with or that cannot be debunked. If people start acting aggressive, insulting, hostile, etc., the comments will be locked and post removed. We're all adults here, so let's act like it and be cordial in our communications. So clearly, again, this is what all sham subreddit moderators do. Anything that they don't like, they pretend it was too subjectively aggressive, or there was their subjective perception of insulting. And most of the time, they know that it actually wasn't aggressive, insulting, or hostile. They just know it was damaging to their narrative. So that's why they had to shut it down, and they just pretended it was for all these other reasons. Because again, and they're openly admitting civility is much more important than the truth, than justice, than any of these things. Being polite, for whatever reason, these goofs hallucinate that being polite supersedes and trumps everything else. Really weird, but again, that's why lies have speed, but the truth has endurance. And that's why all these years later, there are certain individuals who want the truth and who will not stop and who will not pretend and hallucinate that these survivors that clearly spotted shooters other than Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris don't exist, because they do exist. Now, maybe they're mistaken, but to pretend they're not actually giving testimony that they're giving, that is a staple of these Dunning-Kruger coincidence theorists. And there are a few solid posters in this subreddit as well. It's not the users are not 100% shams, just the moderators. But the majority of users here are not truth seekers either. They're, again, coincidence theorists, the Dunning-Kruger crowd, either intentionally steering away from the truth and shutting down lines of logical inquiry, or they're simply authority-worshipping cultists who do not understand basic logic, reason, critical thinking. So some posts here. A giant chunk of news footage recorded was either not archived or purposely never released, because journalists wanted to cover up the fact that they broadcasted footage of police recklessly firing into the school, showing uncensored bodies on national television, showing the infamous "one am bleeding to death" sign, but ignoring it, resulting in the death of Dave Sanders, and most controversially, interviewing students right after they escaped the school and immediately asking sensitive questions. Everyone was critical of the police and media for handling the situation very, very, very poorly, and they wanted to push forward that narrative that the police actually saved the day when they really didn't. So covering up any existing footage that shows their mistakes would spare them of any more criticism. This also goes hand in hand with the theory that law enforcement injured students. And again, I'm not sure how that has been debunked. The sham moderators pretend it all has, but another comment here: everyone should be critical of the police. The police aim to be heroes, but more often than not, when something like this happens, they wait outside like cowards they are until the shooting stops. And authority-worshipping cultists responded here: you just wait until you need the police. Not hating, just pointing out the obvious. The other individual's response was this: they will probably show up after I am dead or the crime has already occurred. I had my car broken into. I called the cops. An officer came, took some notes, and I never heard from the department again. And of course, there's that old adage, when seconds matter, police are only minutes away. Not to say, of course, that there aren't a lot of good cops out there, possibly the majority of cops, but yep. I don't know if one can claim it's the vast majority.
I would say the majority of cops are hero of service types that are doing incredible work on a daily basis, sacrificing so much for people, and they are necessary. But yes, there are a minority of law enforcement, especially in more built-up, controlled, captured areas, that are just like drinking the Kool-Aid, that are part of the two-tiered justice system that we're dealing with.
Another post here. There's a theory that Eric and Dylan's outside circle tried to join them after they heard a shooting was taking place. The rumor is based on the fact that the police found a couple of high school kids with trench coats near the school hiding in the bushes with BB rifles. Also, that the perpetrator of the subway murders that happened a year after Columbine is somehow connected to the shooter. And post by user since deleted attempting to debunk this theory, and we'll look at how silly he is. This isn't true, but I think you've conflated several reports. I've summarized the accounts I think you're referring to with page numbers from the Columbine report. Jacob Apodaca and Chris Wisher were in Weaver Park near Columbine High School when they allegedly saw a shooter duck down in the bushes with a shotgun in hand, and this is from, these are pages 654 and 1262. Larry Petty, a 27-year-old man, was arrested after running toward the school with a knife and an empty 22 cal bolt-action rifle. He claimed it was an air-pump 22 cal BB pellet gun, but the arresting officer opened the bolt to check for ammunition, so he would have been able to tell. Perry also claimed that a student had called him at 11:30 a.m. to stop the gunman, although he later admitted that he hadn't known anyone at the school since the early 90s. Pages 9773 and 7658. Now, the problem with a lot of these so-called debunkings, not just in this case, but in any case, if there was a conspiracy and the police were in on it and intimidated people, who's to say they didn't intimidate this guy to change his story? I mean, part of known conspiracies, people are intimidated, they change their story. Yet somehow the coincidence theorists and the Dunning-Kruger crowd regarding the Columbine conspiracy, they hallucinate that that's evidence of it not happening. Let's trust the witnesses out of one side of their mouth, out of the witnesses who changed their stories, let's trust the story that matches the official narrative, while on the other side of their mouth saying witnesses aren't reliable with all the witnesses who don't match the official story. I mean, it's quite comical, the illogicality of coincidence theorists. John Ungerland said he saw Robert Perry driving a red Geo Metro near the school at about 2:30 p.m. According to him, someone fitting Joe Stayer's description was hanging out the window with a pistol, and they were both wearing trench coats. His girlfriend, Jenny Matthews, also got a small glimpse of them, and although she could not identify either one, she gave similar descriptions of their appearances, hair color, ages, dress. However, she said the object one of them was holding was 2 feet long, and she thought it was a camera. Camera or not, it's still plenty suspicious. 1702-503. And it's also curious how the coincidence theorists dismiss all these reports, even though some of them occur at times when the shooters, where Klebold and Harris were supposedly in the building. So clearly something's not matching up. A response here by Get Trailed. WTF. Columbine is like a dream. There's so much random expletive appearing every now and then, and it just doesn't sound real. And that's a good point, but all of this can be verified from the reports, which we will be diving into. Regarding the splatterpunks, another post here. The splatterpunks were 3 mysterious teens who showed up to the school dressed very similar to Eric and Dylan. They were associates of Eric, but didn't go to Columbine. They claimed that they had been driving around and heard a report about the shooting on the radio, which prompted them to drive to Columbine. According to Sheriff Stone, there had not yet been any information about the shooting broadcast by the radio at the time they claimed to have heard it. Out of suspicion, they were arrested. One report states one of them said, quote, "We're here to help our friends," end quote. This has led to many conspiracy theorists debating if they knew about the attack beforehand and were there to either watch or participate. Friends of the splatterpunks claimed they had similar plans to get back to their own school because they hated it, and that branches off into a whole bunch of other conspiracies. And the splatterpunks is a way that the coincidence theorists attempt to debunk. Even though they didn't go into the building, into the high school, they attempt to kind of say people conflated stories. And we will be going over 100 accounts of students in the building who did not identify Klebold or Harris and who knew them. A percentage of which who knew them, and a percentage of whom knew exactly who they identified and were not and claimed vehemently they were not mistaken. So the coincidence theorists, the sham moderators at the subreddit, they all pretend and hallucinate that there was some kind of innocent conflation done with the splatterpunks, and there were no other reports of other shooters. And some other posts here. It's kind of an old school rabbit hole of the case, which doesn't seem to be explored much anymore. I personally find so many things about the massacre and events surrounding very suspicious. This is one of them. Why would 3 guys dressed in fatigues who knew Eric and Dylan show up at the school during the massacre before it was even broadcast on the radio? And it's actually almost comical how none of these conspiracies are debunked, like these sham subredditors pretend they are, and then even sticky comments at the top to pretend that they were debunked. I mean, all quite comical. So let's jump into one of the only legitimate subreddits left, even though it's been infiltrated by tons of coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists in recent years. Of course, the conspiracy subreddit, r/conspiracy. Toronto's Angry Ghost posted this 3 years ago. I don't know if it's copy-pasted from other areas, but we've heard this repeated many times. We're going to go into the main conspiracy, the multiple shooter theory. Why did over 100 witnesses report seeing more than 2 gunmen or assailants, including an adult, who did not resemble Harris or Klebold? Why was no action taken when over 40 witnesses identified other assailants by name? Why were these other assailants associates of the suspects who had histories of violence, hatred for their peers, and sketchy alibis allowed to walk? One of the most damning things for me, actually, when I was looking into this, is that certain students refused to go back to school when they moved to Chatfield High School nearby. Some of them did not return because they stated they didn't want to go to school with murderers who killed their classmates. I mean, this has all been swept under the rug, but it's so shocking. They were so adamant about who they saw, what they saw, that they just refused to continue going to school because they didn't want to sit next to murderers who killed their classmates. This is their beliefs. Again, the coincidence theorists pretend and hallucinate they're all mistaken, but they feel this strongly about it. I mean, I wasn't there, they were. So the people that were there, you kind of, again, they might be mistaken. Maybe. I mean, if it was only one person, you could make that case. If it was only 2 or 3. You have dozens of people here, as you would expect. And that's a common attempted debunking, however pathetic, by the coincidence theorists, is that if there really were other shooters, there'd be more than 1 or 2 people that had saw them. There would have been a ton of people who saw them, which is exactly what we have. We have over 100 accounts. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, the mountain of evidence for multiple shooters is just astronomical. Okay, so let's go to whatreallyhappened.com. This was posted 8 years after Columbine. It's titled Columbine 8 Years Later. And it just says here, submitted by a reader. There is no name here. Columbine, 101 witnesses, can't be wrong. And, of course, reference will be made to the 11K report, and this was, of course, Jefferson County's document release, November 21st, 2000, 11,000 pages of witness testimony. Some of it is heavily redacted, and one also has to wonder, what is not released? How many thousands of pages are not released that include even more damning testimony or information than what is released? But the fact that there's so much in what already was released, how can one not question what was not released? But let's continue here. According to the final report of the investigation, only 2 people, Eric Harris, 18, and Dylan Klebold, 17, planned and executed the mass shooting at Columbine High School outside Littleton, Colorado on April 20th, 1999, leaving 15 dead and 23 wounded. But at least 101 eye and ear witnesses remembered it differently. 1. Chris Wisher, sophomore, page 1261. He turned and saw two guys carrying shotguns and wearing black trench coats. A third guy, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, was seen throwing bombs onto the roof. So we have a third individual spotted by Chris Wisher. Now, to those that saying this was some kind of misinterpretation, we have a video interview with Chris Wisher. Let's listen to it right now.
This is Channel 4 Live. Can you tell us your name, please?
Chris Wisher.
Chris, where were you?
I was in back of the school behind the cafeteria when we heard what sounded like fireworks. So we went back. We started running. We came back. We just figured it was fireworks. We looked up. We saw two kids in trench coats with guns and another kid just standing there on the side of the school in white. We saw him. One of them turned at us, started shooting.
Toward you?
Yeah, towards us. We were probably 100 yards away. We fell to the ground, and then the bullets stopped. I don't know what he was doing. He might have been reloading or something. So we got back up. We looked over. We saw the kid in the white throwing the bombs on top of the school. He's some kind of grenade or something. I don't know what it was.
He was dressed in white?
He was wearing a white shirt, yes. And I don't know whether he was armed or not with a gun. And at that time, we just ran.
Please don't give us any names, but did you recognize these students?
Yeah, I thought I recognized one of them.
As a current student?
Yeah.
Okay, glad you're okay. Have you reconnected with your mom and dad now?
Yeah, I've talked to them. They're probably watching right now.
Well, I hope you're okay. Thanks so much for talking, Carol. You know, we're with Chris. You're the ones who said you saw the gunman shooting at you.
Yes.
Correct? He was shooting at you.
Yeah.
Now, you say you saw police just arrest him?
Well,
Please don't give us a name on the air, but go ahead and tell us
right,
what happened.
He got in a black police car. Police had a lot of security around him. It's the kid that I've seen around school a lot. I'm pretty sure that's him. I'm not gonna say it's a 100% guarantee that was him, but I'm almost positive it was.
Is he the one you believe was shooting at you on the playground today?
Yes, I believe it was.
How can we misinterpret that? Chris Wisher here is stating that the third suspect was arrested, or possibly another shooting suspect, another shooter was arrested. He is stating here he saw the shooter. Now, he does say he's not 100% positive, but he's stating that he saw somebody shooting at him get arrested. Curious.
Was he dressed in a trench coat?
Yeah. Well, when they just took him away, he wasn't, but he was there.
Was he handcuffed?
Yeah.
Was he talking? Were police?
He was just quiet.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. I know that's emotional for you. I'm sorry you're upset. Thanks so much for talking to us. Again, he describes the situation where they were out on the grounds of the school at lunchtime, that this person in a trench coat started shooting directly at them. They hit the ground, and then they just came running up to say that they saw that particular person. They believe that particular suspect was just loaded into a police car. Christina Yao is here. Maybe you can.
Okay, so you could say he's mistaken, but the coincidence theorist pretending and hallucinating that something was lost in translation, we have it here on video. Not all of the news footage was completely scrubbed. Some of it is still available on the internet. Some of it was FOIA'd, some of it was gotten by various researchers, some of it was simply archived. There was a lot more on YouTube back in the day, years and years ago. Most of it has been scrubbed. Most of the questionable stuff has been scrubbed, coincidentally. But some of it remains. Some of it was saved by people and re-uploaded. So that is Chris Wisher's account. In no uncertain terms, he is clearly stating there were three individuals, one of them in a white t-shirt and jeans, now he didn't mention the jeans in this video interview, but it's mentioned in the 11K report, that this individual was throwing grenades, and he's saying another individual who was shooting at him was just arrested. He does state he's not 100% positive, but he believes it was this individual. Who knows? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but we have it from his mouth. So all the coincidence theorists out there, there's no misinterpretation here. This is what he stated. So let's look at through the 11K documents. This is interview with Chris Wisher on 4/20/99 at about 1600, 10 hours, I was contacted by Chris Wisher in the parking lot of Clement Park. Wisher stated he had already been interviewed previously, but that he wished to contact me and provide me with further information. And this is written by reporting officer Moore. So Wisher is going to the officer with further info because he identified an individual, not Klebold and Harris. So here it is. Wisher stated that he was behind the school by the cafeteria when he heard what he thought was fireworks going off. Wisher said he saw two kids in trench coats and described one of the kids as wearing a white t-shirt and throwing bombs on the school. So two kids in trench coats, one kid not in a trench coat, t-shirt, throwing bombs. Wisher said he was not positive, but he believed one of the suspects was redacted. Wisher said that the other kid in the trench coat fired a shotgun at him and that at this time he knew what was going on was real. And just for clarification, Klebold and Harris's names are not redacted. So when there are redacted names, also the length of the words of redacted are various lengths as well. So you can kind of see that he's not talking about Klebold or Harris in certain situations when Klebold or Harris is also mentioned in the same sentence that is not redacted. Wisher stated that the other suspect in the trench coat had an automatic rifle. Wisher stated that after the incident started, he ran from the scene through a field and waved down a car and went to someone's house and called 911. Wisher stated that his first interview was in more detail as to what occurred at this time. Wisher stated the reason he wished to contact me was the fact that a reporter had contacted him while he was standing outside the crime scene tape, and the reporter knew that Wisher had been interviewed by law enforcement officers. He stated the reporter asked him if the kid that was sitting in the red van being interviewed by law enforcement officials was one of the suspects. Note, the person in the red van being interviewed was redacted. Wisher stated that the reporter asked him to go up to the van and look and see if that was one of the suspects and to let him know. Wisher stated he looked at redacted and then told the reporter that it looked like one of the suspects, but he could not tell him for sure if it was. I then asked Wisher if the person in the van was one of the suspects he saw. He told me that redacted looked like one of them, but he could not tell me it was one of them. He stated he was unsure if this was the same person he had seen in the parking lot. Many speculate he's talking about Brooks Brown here, and that it was also not the person in the white shirt, which was an older individual in their 30s, according to others. Again, I'm just mixing and matching here to see who saw what. This is the FBI document that follows here. Again, you can find this all in the 11K reports. This was dated April 28, 1999. April 27, 1999, Christopher Howard Wisher, date of birth March 1983, of his address, Littleton, Colorado. Telephone number, stated his telephone number here, was interviewed at this residence in the presence of his father, Howard E. Wisher, date of birth April 12, 1949. After advisement of the identity of the interviewing agent and the nature of the interview, he provided the following information. Wisher is a sophomore at Columbine High School. He normally eats lunch during fourth period, which he has free, and at the end of the period at 11:10, he and his friends normally go outside. On April 20th, 1999, just prior to the 11:15 bell, he and his friends, Jake Abodaka, Josh Chavez, and John, last name unknown. That's curious. The FBI doesn't even know the last names of the student, and they couldn't verify with the yearbook. Weird. We're sitting at a table inside the cafeteria near the south window, which faces a parking lot. Wisher saw Dylan Klebold walk into the southwest entrance to the cafeteria from the parking lot. He was dressed all in black with black trousers, black shirt, black boots, a black trench coat, and a black Colorado Avalanche hat worn backwards, which had a Boston Red Sox emblem sewn on it. Wisher does not recall Klebold carrying anything and saw him walk over to the vending machines in the cafeteria. According to Wisher, during lunch, Klebold and Eric Harris would normally sit in Klebold's BMW in the parking lot on the south side of the cafeteria and watch people. Wisher only knows Klebold and Harris by sight, so he knows Klebold and Harris and what they look like. He's not friends with them personally. He doesn't know them as they're stating here, he's not good friends with them or anything. He only knows them basically who they are in general and can identify from a distance. After the 11:15 bell, Wisher and his friends walked out of the southwest exit of the cafeteria towards the soccer field. He heard a sound which sounded like fireworks, similar to a string of Black Cat firecrackers going off. Wisher indicated that prior to April 20th, 1999, he had never heard gunfire. About 50 yards away, outside on the west side of the cafeteria, he saw a tall, white male dressed all in black with a black trench coat and what he thinks was a black hat and dark sunglasses. At the time, he did not recognize this person, but thought it might be redacted. A member of the Trenchcoat Mafia who is about the same height and build. And to all the coincidence theorists and those attempting to rewrite the narrative of Columbine, the official narrative, the Trenchcoat Mafia being a myth was kind of instituted as well, but you'll hear many, many students refer to the Trenchcoat Mafia and members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. So to the goofs that try to pretend the Trenchcoat Mafia never even existed, that's quite silly. Now, supposedly, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were not official members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. They simply were friends with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. So, and they hung out with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. So to those saying the Trenchcoat Mafia wasn't even real, you have countless references. It's in all the FBI reports, the police reports, the eyewitnesses who were present, who actually went to the school and were familiar with the Trenchcoat Mafia and Trenchcoat Mafia members. So all of this information, the devout coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists who believed whatever they saw in the idiot box for the rewritten narrative, some of them maintain there's no Trenchcoat Mafia. Okay. So Wisher saw this person shoot at 3 students near the southwest corner of the cafeteria with what he thinks was a shotgun based upon the loud noise and the slower rate of fire. This shooter then pointed the shotgun at Wisher and his friends and fired 4 or 5 shots at them. Wisher and his friends fell to the ground, covered their heads. When Wisher looked up, he saw the gunman walking towards the southwest cafeteria entrance. Wisher also saw a white male dressed in a white short-sleeved t-shirt and blue jeans kneeling with his back to him near the northwest corner of the cafeteria. He did not recognize this person, and since his back was to him, could only tell he had either light brown or blonde hair. This person had no weapon nor other gear visible. Wisher saw this person throw an object one-handed on top of the cafeteria library roof. It appeared metallic with sunlight glinting off of it. 1 or 2 seconds after landing, it exploded with a loud bang, a flash of fire, and a pall of smoke. While he observed the person in the black trench coat shooting outside and the person in the white t-shirt throwing the explosive device, he also heard very rapid gunfire coming from somewhere within the school. Let me read that part again. While he observed the person in the black trench coat shooting outside and the person in the white t-shirt throwing the explosive device, he also heard very rapid gunfire coming from somewhere within the school. Wisher was unable to see who was doing the shooting or tell exactly from where inside the school it was coming from. After this person threw the bomb, Wisher and his friends got up and ran to a nearby house on Teller Street, where Wisher called his father to let him know he was safe. Howard Wisher indicated he noted the time of the call as 11:20 a.m. Wisher knows 2 members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, Joe Stair, a former Columbine student who graduated last year, and Chris Morris. He spoke with Morris once about the sport of paintball, which they both play. Wisher indicated Morris normally sits by himself at a table on the south side of the cafeteria near the window, but he cannot recall if he saw him in the cafeteria on April 20th, 1999. So that's actually quite curious because I don't know if Morris and Joe Stair's names are not redacted because they're not being accused here. They're simply members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. They're not directly named. I don't know if these particular names are redacted elsewhere where they're being accused of being shooters. That's unclear to me. So I don't know what to make of that because I believe other individuals named Joe Stair and Chris Morris as shooters, and they might have those names redacted elsewhere. But in this particular area of the document, it's curious because does that mean Wisher's not referring to either one of them? Since he know what, it's just curious the way that it would be written into this report. Now, what's also curious in some of these follow-up reports, including with Wisher, apparently he's being convinced by investigators because he's shown pictures of Harris, and coincidentally, one of the agents is Special Agent Harris. I'm assuming no relation to Eric Harris. This is Special Agent Matthew Harris, who first interviewed Christopher Wisher. And they showed him all these pictures. Then, and again, this is all in the report here. Wisher stated he was almost positive it was not redacted. Then the investigator told Wisher that redacted was not at the school at the beginning of the incident. Wisher replied, "Then I guess it is not him." So is this a weird attempt, not necessarily at intimidation, but at controlling the narrative after the fact? Because this follow-up report is October 13th, 1999. I mean, this is months and months later. The incident is no longer fresh in his mind, and the investigator might be telling him the guy that he identified was not at the school. We also don't know the tone of this interview. Because if this is an intimidation type interview where they're trying to get him to change his story, either way, the original reports, the original accounts, he's clearly stating he knew both Klebold and Harris. He's clearly stating that the other individual is not them. He's clearly stating there are 3 individuals. He's also stating that while 2 of the individuals were in his view, someone else was shooting inside the school. Maybe he's mistaken about all of it. Maybe. Maybe he is. But that's just the first of over 100 accounts. So let's move on now to Jake Apodaca, sophomore. He was at, this is on page 653, which we'll go over in a moment. He was at the soccer field, heard firecrackers. He turned and saw 2 guys carrying shotguns, wearing black trench coats and black t-shirts. A third guy wearing a white t-shirt and jeans was seen throwing bombs onto the roof. So, like Chris Wisher, Apodaca saw the exact same thing. So now we have verification. So this isn't one individual being mistaken or being panicked and not knowing what they saw. Here, in the second account, we have a second individual clearly stating this. And guess what? We also have a video of an interview with Apodaca. Let's listen to it.
Just if I could identify any of the gunmen.
Because tell me, you actually saw the gunman and they were firing at you and your group?
Yeah.
Describe that scene. And
well, me and my friend Chris were just out during lunch by the student parking lot, and we heard what sounded like firecrackers, and so we looked over and we saw some guys with guns creeping around a corner, and we thought it was like a senior prank or something. So we just kept watching to see what they were going to do, and we saw him shoot 3 kids, and so we started going back on the soccer field, and he looked at us, and then he started shooting at us, and so we fell to the ground, and then we got back up after he started shooting, and we saw a guy in a white t-shirt throw some bombs or something on the top of the school.
Did they appear to be targeting certain students or just whoever was in their path?
It didn't really look like they were aiming at kids. It just looked like they were just kind of shooting randomly.
And tell me what police officers were asking you.
They just wanted to know if I got a good look or if I knew who the shooters were.
Please don't tell me their names, but were you able to identify them? Did you recognize them?
Yeah, one of them. The main gunman I did recognize.
And he's a student at your school?
Yeah.
You have your yearbook here. Is that because police asked you to identify people?
Yeah.
Who were they asking you to identify?
Just any of the gunmen that I recognized.
And were you able to find their pictures in the yearbook for them?
I didn't find the gunmen's, but I found some people's pictures in there that usually hang out with them and are part of the Trenchcoat Mafia.
People keep talking about this. How large a group is this at your school?
About 10, 15 kids, something like that.
All boys?
Yeah.
And how long have they been in existence? Is it a new thing?
Well, ever since been going to Columbine.
Since how long?
2 years.
So they've been here since that time?
Yeah, as far as I know.
And are they well known?
Yeah, pretty much.
And what do they do?
They don't really do anything. They just keep to themselves, and they just stick out because they always wear black clothes and dark and long trench coats and army clothes and stuff like that.
Okay, well, we're glad you're okay. Thanks for talking with us. Appreciate it. Again, we've seen...
So, clear report there. Also clear references to the Trenchcoat Mafia, a group of individuals, a dozen or so. by another student who went to Columbine, who experienced this and who knew these individuals. So he noticed them, and then also another individual, white shirt, jeans, throwing bombs on the roof. So here we have page 653 of the 11K. This is the Littletown Police Department report. Jacob Apodaca at soccer field with a friend, heard what sounded like firecrackers, saw 3 subjects near school shooting. One threw bombs onto the roof of a school. Subject shotgun toward him and his friend. He and his friend ran into a house, called 911. He saw a gunman duck down with a shotgun in the Weaver Park. Subjects were white male, 2 wearing black trench coats, black berets, black pants, black army boots, black t-shirts, carrying shotguns. He has seen these 2 at school before, but did not find them in the yearbook he was shown. The 3rd subject had light brown hair, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans, throwing bombs onto the roof, saw one explode. Apodaca has not seen him at the school before. So again, he's saying the same thing as Chris Wisher. 2 of the guys he's familiar with. The 3rd guy he's never seen before. Now, here's the thing. A lot of the coincidence theorists think that since Eric Harris entered with a trench coat, then took the trench coat off, he was mistaken for a 3rd guy. Whereas clearly he's being seen at the same time as the 3rd guy. Clearly it's being stated that the 3rd subject was never seen at the school before. So Eric Harris, with or without a trench coat, is a guy that's been at the school before, and there's no way to misinterpret this. No matter how hard the coincidence theorists pretend and hallucinate to try to soothe their dissonance that the official narrative has to be true, and there's no chance it's not true, we have clear contradictory evidence, and we're only on report 2 of over 100. Now, what's curious in this handwritten statement, names, so the trenchcoat not mafia, so this is not redacted. Okay, so he's clearly stated that these trenchcoat mafia members were not the gunmen. Robert Perry, Brian Sargent, Joseph Stair, and Thaddeus Bowles. Curious indeed, because other individuals did identify these as the shooters. This is the FBI's report here, February 28th, 1999. April 27th, 99, Jacob Anthony Apodaca was interviewed in the presence of Howard E. Wisher with the permission of his mother, Vicky Apodaca. After advisement of the identity of the interviewing agent and the nature of the interview, he provided the following information. Apodaca is a sophomore, Columbine High School, April 20th, 99 at 11:10 a.m., which is the end of the 4th period. He went to the cafeteria to meet his friends, Chris Wisher, Josh Chavez, and John, last name unknown. So there's a John here. They don't know. So neither Wisher nor Apodaca know the last name of the John that they're friends with, and the FBI cannot produce a yearbook for them to identify this other John. I don't know what to make of that, but let's continue. Just prior to the 11:15 bell, while sitting at a table near the south window in the cafeteria, he saw Dylan Klebold walk into the cafeteria through the southwest entrance. He was dressed all black, black boots, black trousers, black shirt, black trench coat, and was wearing a backwards hat with a Boston Red Sox emblem. Apodaca knew Klebold only by sight and indicated that during lunch he normally sat in the BMW in the parking lot on the south side of the cafeteria. Apodaca and his friends walked out of the southwest exit of the cafeteria towards the soccer field. He heard what sounded like a string of firecrackers going off and turned towards the school and saw 2 white males crouching along the northwest corner of the cafeteria. One person who was dressed in a white short-sleeved shirt, blue jeans, no weapon visible. The other person was dressed all black, black trousers, black shirt, black trench coat, black beret, and was wearing what appeared to be a black mask. Curious. And that's another curious thing. There's random reports of people wearing masks as the shooters as well. He did not recognize either of these individuals, since one had on a mask and the person in the white t-shirt, because he was crouched down with his back to him. Apodaca saw the person in the white t-shirt throw an object about the size of a soda can on top of the library. This object appeared metallic since it looked silver in the sunlight. 1 or 2 seconds after landing on the roof, it exploded. with a loud boom, flash of fire, puff of smoke. He then threw a second object on the roof, which also exploded. After the second device exploded, the person dressed in the black trench coat walked west from the northwest side of the cafeteria and shot at 3 students near the southwest corner of the cafeteria with what Apodaca believes was a shotgun. After shooting at these 3 people, the shooter fired 4 or 5 times at Apodaca and his friends, who were about 40 to 50 yards away. They fell to the ground, and after the shooter entered the school through the southwest cafeteria entrance, they got up and ran to a nearby house on Teller Court. Apodaca knew who Eric Harris was, but never talked with him. He knows 2 other members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, Joe Stair, who graduated from Columbine High School last year, and Chris Morris. During lunch, Morris usually sits by himself at a table on the south side of the cafeteria, but he cannot recall if he saw Morris there on April 20th, 1999. According to Apodaca, the audiovisual class transmits a phrase of the day over the school television system each day at the end of the second period. Apodaca recalls the phrase of the day on April 20th, 1999, which was broadcast on televisions in each classroom, appeared to be written in German. He later heard from other friends this phrase of the day was transmitted by Trenchcoat Mafia members in the audiovisual class and was translated to mean, "Today is the day you wish you weren't here." Now that's creepy on a lot of levels. That does point to insider knowledge, maybe. This is actually the first I've heard that it was written in German. I don't know if people are misremembering. The coincidence theorists always want to rewrite everything. I would surmise that the closer to the time of the event would be the most accurate. I mean, even this FBI report was written on the 28th regarding the interview on the 27th, whereas the original police report was day of. So that's just keep in mind. So if there was some kind of cover-up, conspiracy, intimidation to change stories, that was not apparent initially, and it could have been done after the fact. And a lot of the so-called follow-up interviews months later, or even weeks later, they're quite curious because they seem to be quite different from the original reports. But let's continue here. Jonathan Cole, freshman. This is page 749. He noticed 2 tall guys in black trench coats. He saw a third male wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans. This person looked over to the other 2 suspects and yelled, "Go, go." So not only did Apodaca back up Wisher on everything, including the 3 individuals, now we have another individual, Jonathan Cole. It'd be curious if he was the one with Chris and Jake. We'll look over that in a moment. But he saw all 3 suspects, and he saw the third one yell to the other 2, "Go, go." Now, no matter how devout of a coincidence theorist you are, if you're going to hallucinate that all these people are mistaken simply because Eric Harris took off a trench coat and they thought there were 3 people, how does that explain a witness clearly seeing a third individual speak to Dylan and Eric? I mean, does that make any sense to anybody? Like, how even the most devout coincidence theorist, how do you explain that? You could say that Jonathan Cole is lying, that he's misremembering, but you cannot say he mistook Eric Harris for 2 individuals because he's seeing 3 at the same time. So let's go to page 749. Witness Jonathan Justin Cole. And action taken here. This is June 1st, 1999. Reporting agent Linda Holloway and CBI agent Jerry Means meet with Jonathan Cole and his parents at Columbine High School. I had spoken briefly with Jonathan to schedule a meeting and learned that he believed he saw 3 males involved in shooting guns and throwing bombs at Columbine High School, April 20th, 1999. He was asked to relay the events as he remembered them of that day. Jonathan walked to school, arriving at 7:15 a.m. He was with friends Jake Apodaca and Chris Wisher. So it looks like this, according to this, he's that John that they couldn't identify immediately. And we have some more information here. After arriving at school, he went to his first period gym class where he played dodgeball. Fellow student Brooks Brown is in his gym class and was present on April 20th. He talked with Brown during class and recalled that he was wearing brown boots or black boots, black pants, and a brown shirt. So does that mean, if this is all accurate, does that mean Chris Wisher was not referring to Brooks Brown as the other shooter? He then went to his second period class. Mr. Sanders was his teacher. and Sanders talked about his family during the class. Cole then attended Mrs. White's science class during third period. Between third and fourth period, he saw Brooks Brown. He talked with him briefly and saw him walk out the front door next to the office on the east side of the building. On his way to Cole's fourth period class, he passed by Brooks Brown's fourth period class and observed that Brown was not seated at his usual desk next to the door. During a walk to the school, Brown's fourth period class is in room SS2. And for those that don't know, Eric Harris is the one who walked by Brooks Brown and told him to go home, thus sparing his life, according to the official narrative, according to Brooks Brown. Now, we obviously, I don't know if we have anybody else's word for that other than Brooks Brown. There may or may not have been a witness to that interaction, but that witness would have been from a distance off, so they would not necessarily be able to corroborate what was said between them. And if Brooks Brown is somehow part of this, again, I'm not alleging he is or he is not. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is we don't know anything for sure. But if he was, obviously, he would make up a story like that to make him appear innocent. Okay, continuing on here. Jonathan showed us his route through the halls from his locker and past room SS2 that he takes every day on his way to fourth period class in room LA13. It was observed that Brooks Brown's desk can be readily seen through the 3x3 window in the door. His desk is usually the closest to the door. Not all of the classroom is visible to someone walking by and casually looking through the window or through the open door. The only other significant information that he shared about Brooks Brown is that he smokes Camel cigarettes. Cole finished his fourth period class and walked out of the school via the doors located on the upper level just north of the library on the west side. He met up with Jack Apodaca and Chris Wisher when he noticed two males in trench coats. One was wearing a ski mask with one large hole in it. Both were tall and believed that they had just come through the same doors that he exited from. He did not recall them wearing hats, however. It was his perception that one had a white shirt on under his trench coat and one was wearing a black shirt and a black or dark pants or jeans. He recalled that one had brown, puffy hair. Now, another curiosity is that, so Eric Harris wasn't particularly tall when compared to Dylan Klebold. So Dylan Klebold was 6'3", so that's really tall. Now, would you call a guy standing next to him that's closer to 5'8"-ish tall? Maybe. I mean, he's not super short. I'm sure there were guys in the high school probably closer to 5 feet, 5'4", 5'5", and under that. So would 5'8" be tall? Possibly. So a Columbine site said he was 5'6.5". His license says he's 5'7". The autopsy says 5'8.5".
Huh. That's a little different.
So if we just round all that around, I mean, maybe that would be about between 5'7" and 5'8". Also, some believe that he was very insecure about his height. He apparently listed his height as like 5'11" on some online websites or whatever. So, yeah. But what's curious is that Dylan's height the autopsy matches his driver's license, and Eric's autopsy does not. So, I mean, it's possible, I guess, he grew more. But either way, it's not enough to give us a ton of information with two tall guys. But I don't know, in a lot of the you can clearly tell one guy is shorter than the other from a distance. I don't know. Again, depending on the distance, but Dylan at 6'3", I mean, I don't know if you would call both of them super tall, and Dylan usually does tower over just about everybody. So it's a weird optic. It's a weird optic, unless these are not. I mean, I don't know who's he describing here with the mask. So either way, let's continue here. The two males walked to the corner of the building, stood off the sidewalk looking down the steps that led to the cafeteria and senior parking lot. He recalled seeing a third male who was wearing a white t-shirt that had either short sleeves or no sleeves, blue jeans, exit the building behind the two trenched males. So he's clearly stating he sees two guys in trench coats at the same time as the third guy in the white shirt. He next remembered that the male in the white shirt yelled at the other two males in trench coats to go. He then observed the two males with the trench coats draw weapons. One pulled a shotgun, one pulled a large semi-auto gun. They began shooting at students below. He recalled hearing kids scream and one student fall to the ground. He began to run in a westerly direction. He recalled looking back and seeing the male in the white shirt throw what he believed were bombs on the roof area of the library. He thought that he threw 4 or 5 bombs and that some exploded. He and his 2 friends were shot at by the gunman. They dropped to the grass at one point and then got up and ran as fast as they could away from the school. He believed that they were near a fence when he heard bullets whiz by his head. They ran to the safety of a nearby residence. Jonathan Cole related that when he went back to pick up his backpack and other belongings that he had left at the school with his mother today, that he saw a male that reminded him of the male in the white shirt who was throwing bombs. Wow. This is mind-shocking. His male was described as 5'10", wearing black sunglasses and having collar-length blondish brown hair. He did not know that student's name. So he's stating that there's a particular student, I guess they were doing interviews that day, follow-up interviews on June 1st, 1999. He's stating that this other student is here or reminded him of this. That's curious. But his report with the third suspect in the white shirt, some of the conspiracies allege this guy's reported as being in his 30s or much older than a high school student. Not by these accounts that we went over so far, by other accounts that we'll get to. Some allege that this guy was their handler. And if this was some kind of covert op, and they were being either MK Ultra'd or something, they had some kind of a handler for this operation, and this individual was the handler. Others surmised this was some kind of trenchcoat mafia occult situation that had nothing to do with the government, and there were much older members of cults. And we'll be going down a lot of rabbit holes because there's a lot of mind-shocking rabbit holes, including known connections to occult members and just really wacky stuff that obviously has never been covered in the mainstream. But it's curious that he saw a male that reminded him of the male in the white shirt who was throwing the bombs. He did not know that student's name. He was shown 12 photographic lineup that have been prepared by the task force. He was not able to identify the person he saw dressed in the white t-shirt and throwing bombs on April 20th. He was not close enough to observe facial details of the males wearing the trench coats. A drawing was made from information supplied by Jonathan of the area and approximate distances where he saw the gunman. He was about 73 to 75 feet away from the gunman as they walked from the west doors to the position where they drew guns and began firing. Photographs were taken in this area, Jonathan's view from where he was standing, where he observed the gunman. Various comments were noted on the 12 photographic lineups that Jonathan said he looked at the pictures. He noted that the people he thought he had seen associating with the trenchcoat mafia. He pointed to Klebold and Harris's pictures and stated that he had seen them in the A lunch period. He pointed to the photograph 1 of lineup H, stating that he knows this male as Sarge, and that he believes he's the leader of the trenchcoat mafia. In the same photo lineup, he pointed to photograph 2 and said that he was a tall, fat kid and may have a double-pierced eyebrow, and that he has been seen sporting pickhead and wears chains and needles in his shoes. He believes that this kid smokes. The 12 lineup will also be included with this report. Jonathan Cole gave the telephone numbers of Jake Abadaka and Chris Wisher. Both of reports of their interviews were reviewed, and both indicate that they saw only one gunman with a trench coat and a black shirt and one male with a white shirt who was throwing bombs on the roof. These reports are included also. So that's a deliberate lie right there, because we just went over their reports. They clearly did not say that. Jonathan Cole had attended Columbine High School for only 2 months prior to the incident. He has been homeschooled prior to and since the shooting. Curious indeed. Curious indeed. Would he be harder to intimidate if he wasn't part of the whole Columbine situation? Because if there was something to do with the trenchcoat mafia and all of these other things, death education, some huge conspiracy with the school, would it be easier to get long-standing members of the school to go along versus a newer guy like Jonathan Cole? I don't know. It's just very curious that he clearly stated he saw 3. Not only that, he clearly stated he saw the guy in the white t-shirt talk to the other 2 trench-coated guys. So again, do the coincidence theorists pretend he just didn't know what he saw? He was mistaken. It's just really, really weird. And we'll be getting into the possible people named that were other shooters and individuals that knew the other named shooters and Klebold and Harris and could clearly distinguish between them, and witnesses in the school that saw these individuals from very close range, because these first three guys, they were a little bit of a distance, even though they're fairly certain Klebold and or Harris were definitely who they saw, which is curious as well. Okay, number 4, William Arap Kyles, freshman, page 660. He states that he was at the soccer field and heard firecrackers. He turned and saw 3 people near the west entrance. 2 were wearing black trench coats and carrying guns. The third was wearing a white t-shirt and no visible gun. The person in the white t-shirt was pacing back and forth about 5 feet away from the 2 gunmen. Curious. Yet another witness to the same scene. So he's seeing all 3 at the same time, clearly debunking the coincidence theorist attempted debunking by stating that the third individual was Eric Harris without a trench coat. And so this report here in the 11K is written on May 5th, 1999, which is curious. On May 5th, this was written by investigative agent Gerson is listed, as well as Timothy Steffes. May 5th, 99, I interviewed William Billy Arap Kyles. Billy is a student at Columbine High School and was in the vicinity of the cafeteria at the time of the shootings. I learned about Billy while speaking to his mother about an interview with Billy's sister, Amanda Arap Kyles. Billy reported that he was actually on the soccer field located to the southwest of the cafeteria during the shootings. Billy stated that he had been in the cafeteria between 11 and 11:10 a.m. to see if his other sister, Amy, was going out to lunch. When he found out she had already left for lunch, he then went looking for a soccer ball to play soccer with. When he located the ball, he went to the field where he played with some other students. Billy related that about 5 minutes after he began playing soccer, he heard what sounded like fireworks going off in the area of the cafeteria. Billy said he and others on the field began to cheer and shout, thinking it was a prank. He said that he looked toward the school and observed 3 people near the west entrance to the North Main Hall. Billy stated that 2 of the subjects were wearing trench coats. The third was wearing a white shirt. According to Billy, the 2 subjects wearing the trench coats had guns. He did not see the subject with the white shirt with the firearm. Billy related that the subject wearing the white shirt was pacing back and forth, was about 5 feet away from the other 2 in the trench coats. Billy did not think the subject wearing the white shirt was a victim, but was with the other 2. Billy reported he was too far away to recognize the subjects. And that's curious, too, because other so-called debunkers, coincidence theorists, they somehow think that the other guy might have been a victim, but he's throwing bombs on the roof. That's weird. The other thing is, people who aren't there, there's a certain energy and body language that you can use to even subconsciously to kind of tell, like even if you look at a gang, who's with who. And he seems, this individual, Billy, got the impression that this individual was with the other 2, explicitly stating that he did not think the subject wearing the white shirt was a victim. Billy continued to say that while he was watching the subjects that were shooting at the ground, the subjects were shooting at the ground and into the air. He continued to say that he observed the subjects in the trench coats shoot one person near the top of the outside stairs leading from the cafeteria to the west entrance to the North Hall. He saw them shoot a second person at the bottom of the hill near the cafeteria and a third as the victim was trying to run away across the student parking lot. At about this time, the shooters noticed the people on the soccer field and began firing at them. Billy reported that during the shooting, he believes that a long gun one of the shooters had jammed as there was a pause in the firing. He observed the shooter making a rearward pulling action at the gun like he was cocking a crossbow. Billy reported that he got down on his hands and knees and crawled across the soccer field to the fence on the west edge of the field and jumped the fence into the backyard of a house. Billy reported that he and several students took shelter in this residence. Billy reported that from this residence he dialed 911, reported the shootings. Billy said that while he was in the cafeteria, he did not see anything like a duffel bag on the floor, and no one carried such a bag into the cafeteria while he was there. Billy further advised that none of the subjects he saw doing the shooting were carrying a duffel bag. Billy reported that he's a freshman. He had no additional information, and the interview concluded at 0900. Okay. Just yet another witness making his report crystal clear. Now, you can say he was on hallucinogenics. You can make the claim. There's no evidence of that. But you cannot claim he simply mistook a third individual for Eric Harris without a trench coat, because he's seeing them all three at the same time. He's seeing the two trench-coated figures with guns and the third white shirt and jeans figure pacing near them. Is this an older individual, a handler, kind of nervous before all this is going into action? Is he questioning what he's about to unleash here? Because that's a curious detail, this individual's pacing back and forth. Or does he have an earpiece and is he waiting for a signal in order to give the signal to the two trench-coated figures? All right, let's move on to number 5. Channel 7 News at 12 noon on April 20th, reporter said numerous witnesses he spoke to who were not named said they saw 3 gunmen. That's curious. Is he talking about Wisher and Apodaca? I mean, we'll get to more, of course, here, but Lindsay Elmore Jr. from page 332, I believe there were 3 gunmen. Page 340, there was so much movement that Elmore thought there was more than 2 people. So this might be more of a fuzzy account. Now, the ones we went over were crystal clear, definitive accounts of 3 individuals. Now let's move on to Lindsay Elmore. So this is dated April 23rd, 1999. Her handwritten statement is dated April 20th, 1999. April 21st, 1999, RI called and spoke with Lindsay Elmore, a student of Columbine High School. On April 20th, 1999, Lindsay Elmore was interviewed by a Detective Zimmer of the Denver Police Department. In Lindsay's written report, she made comment that she believed there were 3 gunmen. Let's go through her written statement. First, we heard gunfire, which nobody noticed because it sounded like hammering. A frantic woman ran in and shouted, "Help, help. There are kids with guns out there and they shot a kid." She began to dial 911 and yelled, "Everybody get on the floor." Everybody got underneath the tables in the library. We soon felt the floor shaking because of the explosives below us. Multiple explosions, rapid gunfire, and people screaming could be heard. Some people sobbed quietly. After a long time, the gunmen came up into the library. They began in the west side of the library and came upon the hiding students. They chose a boy and said, "So are you a jock boy?" and fired on him, and next said something about being black and shot another student believed to be black. They continued to fire randomly and seemed to fire towards the windows and metal beams. Next, they moved to the far east side of the library and began to fire again. The shot seemed to be rapid, maybe automatic. They began to talk to a girl and said, "Do you believe in God?" who was whimpering and crying, but answered yes. And they asked, "Why do you believe in God?" She stammered something about because of her parents and fired at her many times. They began to come towards The middle section, I was facing north and they were behind me. They yelled to each other about needing new clips, and one said we'd always wanted to kill someone with a knife. A boy at the table in front of me and to the right moved, and he was fired on at least 5 times. And one of them said, "So he tried to jump ya," nonchalantly. After that, they headed to the front of the library and knocked over a computer and then left. Before they shot the boy next to him, one of the gunmen noticed the boy and said, "Hey, John Savage, what are you doing here? You better get out, and we're going to blow the library up." They allowed him to leave, and he ran out. I believe there were 3 gunmen. Curious. So there's a lot of details here, including the conflated "Do you believe in God" story, which is attributed to Rachel Joy Scott, the Rachel Joy Scott encounter, but apparently this happened in the library, according to this witness. And Rachel Joy Scott was, of course, not in the library, but a Christian. Okay. All right. So clearly stated there were 3 gunmen. Now back to the supplemental report, which was from the 23rd. So the reporting investigator asked Lindsay if it would be all right if I stopped by to discuss her written statement. Okay. Lindsay said it would be fine. At approximately 2:50 p.m., met with Lindsay at her residence, Littleton, Colorado. We went over the contents of her written statement, which she advised was accurate. Lindsay advised that she was in the library on her lunch hour and sat next to a Rebecca that is in her Spanish class. Lindsay stated that she heard a loud noise outside but thought it was construction of some sort. A few seconds later, a frantic woman came into the library. The elderly woman was screaming, "Help, help, there are boys outside with guns. Someone has been shot." The elderly woman and a Mr. Long yelled for everyone to get on the floor under the tables. Lindsay stated that she immediately got on the floor underneath the table. The suspects eventually came into the library. Lindsay advised that she heard one of the suspects say, "So you are a jock boy." Lindsay advised that they then shot the boy. Lindsay stated that she heard something about being black and then shot another student. Lindsay stated that they continued to shoot people. Lindsay stated that she heard one of the suspects ask a girl, "Do you believe in God?" The girl replied, "Yes." The suspect then said, "Why do you believe in God?" Lindsay stated that the girl said something about because of her parents. The suspect or suspects then shot the girl. Lindsay stated that she was in the middle of the room and was facing north. They came toward the middle of the room from behind her. Lindsay stated that one of the suspects yelled about needing new clips. Another suspect said he always wanted to kill someone with a knife. Lindsay stated that a boy at the table in front of her apparently moved and was shot at least 5 times. One of the suspects said, "So he tried to jump ya." The suspects walked back towards the front of the library, knocked over a computer, and then left. Lindsay stated that prior to the shooting, the boy next to her, one of the suspects said, "Hey, John Savage, what are you doing here? You had better get out. We're going to blow the library up." Lindsay stated that the boy got up and left. RI asked Lindsay Elmore if she ever saw the suspects. Lindsay replied, "No. I didn't want to move and was only able to see shadows." Investigator asked why in her written statement did she make the comment, "I believe there were 3 gunmen." Lindsay stated, "Because of the amount of shots fired, I thought there had to be more than 2 shooters." Lindsay Elmore is fairly certain that John Savage came into the library shortly after her and before the shooting started. Lindsay provided investigator with a copy of a journal she drafted after the shooting. No further. So what's curious, did they specifically ask her how many shadows did she see? Did she see 3 distinct shadows? And what about hearing footsteps too? I mean, could she, obviously, if you're in a room, you could do an experiment. Now, if you're in a state of panic, I mean, all of this is tough to recall. But just for reference, you could obviously tell if there are 3 individuals versus 2 based on footprints and movements. She's stating it's based on the rate of fire of the guns. Now, the guns were not fully automatic weapons that Klebold and Eric Harris allegedly used, according to the official narrative. I mean, all of this is obviously very traumatizing, but would a better investigation include simulating the experience, not even necessarily in the library or in a room exactly like the library, but having 3 individuals with semi-auto fire, having the 3 individuals standing close to each other and having them spread out, and then asking her to recall what it sounded more like. And then also having 1 or 2 individuals with full auto, or possibly 2 with semi-auto, 1 with full auto, and just to see what she would say, if she would be willing. Obviously, no one would force her to do that or anything like that, but just to clarify. Now, in the FBI report, there's a couple extra details here. The FBI report was from May 11th. And it states here, Elmer had her head down but did not look up once while she heard the shooting on the west side of the library. She caught a glance of a person against the backlight of the windows near table 18. Because of the backlighting, the person was fuzzy, but she remembers the person was wearing black or dark clothes, was very tall, and had a big head. The gunmen were yelling and laughing, and there was so much movement that Elmore thought there were more than 2 people. The voices she heard were of men. There's also a couple more pieces of info. After the gunfire on the west side of the library, there was a few minutes of quiet, and then the shooting started on the east side of the library. So if her sense of time is a little off in this panic state, of course, anybody would be panicked in that state, perhaps that would lead her to believe that there were 3 gunmen. But what's curious is that she doesn't say there were 4 or 5 or 6 or 1. So it's curious that she specifically said 3. I mean, is that basically just her awareness, her basic senses that put the pieces of the evidence together? Were there 3 sets of footprints, even if or footsteps? Was she not paying attention, but her brain just led her to believe there were 3, whether mistakenly or not? Is it possible there really were 3? And of course, there's other accounts where there were 2 of them at one point, but then a 3rd individual at the library at a different point in time. It's just curious. And then there's a little bit of an inconsistency because she said she had her head down the entire time. Does that mean she, with her head down, she glimpsed something out of the corner of her eye with this backlit figure that was very tall, possibly Dylan Klebold, possibly another individual who's very tall? She doesn't recall how much of gunfire she heard coming from the east side of the library. After the gunfire on the east side slowed, she heard one of the gunmen stating something to the effect of needing more clips. Both gunmen were using profanity throughout the library. She then heard one of the gunmen somewhere behind her shaking the mini blinds of the windows. She heard a clacking sound like it was someone moving the blinds. So again, if there were 2 shadows or 2 people talking in front of her and then someone was clacking and walking behind her, would that lead her to believe there were 3 people? After hearing gunfire near table 9, Elmore doesn't remember hearing any more gunfire within the library. Elmore had her head down most of the time and could give no further detail to the movements and actions of the gunmen. Elmore had no concept of time during the shooting within the library and could not give an estimate of the total time the gunmen were in the library. Also, this explains how she got out of the school. The FBI report also stated Elmore could not recall her locker number. Now that's curious. So was she just that panicked that she couldn't recall her locker number? I don't know. So her account, of course, this is not a bulletproof account by any means. It's nowhere near as solid as the other accounts, but it's curious. It's hard because she had no concept of time. Of course, it's possible there were only 2 people in the library the entire time, but for whatever reason, she thought there were 3. And again, if that was due to footsteps, gunfire, someone moving blinds behind her, perhaps there was a student movement that she didn't know about, and for whatever reason, in all the turmoil, she might have thought that was the 3rd gunman, brain interpreted. Very possible. We don't know. This is definitely not a slam dunk by any means, but curious but she clearly stated, I believe there were 3 gunmen. Not 4, not 2, specifically 3. All right, let's move on to ACSO Nelson, page 8810. A list of 3 names that the 12 witnesses ID'd from a yearbook were turned over to ACSO investigators to forward. So apparently 12 witnesses in this instance, again, I don't know who they were referring to, had a list of 3 names. Now let's see what we make of this. This is on page 8810. So this is from the Arvada Police Department. And apparently this is Officer Nelson doing this interview with Mackay Hall. And what's interesting in this document, Mackay knows Dylan, and he identified Dylan as the guy who shot him. He said he knows the other guy, but he couldn't put a name to him at that moment. And so Hall also reports seeing an unknown subject on the roof area of the school. He was unable to identify for me if this person was a police officer or a suspect. So he also stated here, Nelson asked him if the name redacted, but the length of the name is not Eric Harris. It's not Eric by itself, unless it was listed as maybe Eric H. That would fit, but why would he say that? So there's a redacted name meant anything to him. He immediately responded, yeah, that it was probably redacted. He went on to say that when the shooting began in the library, so then he just said the John Savage situation. So Nelson asked Mackay Hall if this particular redacted name meant anything to him, not Eric Harris, because of course Eric Harris wouldn't be redacted. And he said, yeah. Yeah, it was probably this redacted name, not Eric Harris as the other guy, which is curious. He also stated that he didn't believe Dylan Klebold would have shot him if he had known who he was. Mackay Hall was simply with other jocks, whatever Dylan was shooting. I don't see in the document where there were these three other names. Maybe I just skipped over it, but that's curious from there. Also, it wasn't 8810. Nelson's report is 8884 through 8892. But let's continue. Jason Bear, sophomore, hid in green room off Science Hall. Quote, I heard more than two people yelling to each other, saying over here and stuff. End quote. This is from 1759. Let's examine that. Now, the Denver Police Department statement here says, did not see anything, hid in closet in science room. This is his statement. I was in the science room. I heard a bunch of kids screaming in the hall, so I went out because I thought it was a prank. I heard shots really close, so I went back into the room and told everyone to get into a storage closet or greenhouse. I kept hearing screaming and shots and bombs. We stayed there until about 3 o'clock when the SWAT team came in. While we were in the room, I heard one of them say he wanted to die. I heard more than two people yelling to each other saying, over here and stuff. Now, the rest of the statement is kind of curious as well here. When I first started working at the pretzel maker, I thought Melissa had some problems. She seemed slow and she was weird. She hung out with some of the trench coats that don't go to our school. And again, we'll have to tackle this in a later episode. The trench coat mafia was not limited to Columbine High School. There were multiple trench coat mafias at different schools that associated with each other, and also postgraduates or dropouts that were much older. So the entire trench coat mafia angle hasn't been properly explored. But continuing on here, she talked to Shannon about knowing that Eric and Dylan were planning something. She was supposedly driving to pick up a girl at work, Abigail, and started talking about that. Abigail got scared, went home, and told her mom. Her mom told the cops about it. So if this is all true, that means that it was reported that Eric and Dylan were planning something. The day that Melissa quit, she found out that everyone knew what she had told Abigail and she ran out. She has supposedly been with them when they wrote in the journal about with all of their friends and saw blueprints for a building. Melissa had said that the plan was for Eric and Dylan to die because they wanted to. She said that there were supposed to be about 4 others who were in on it and do some shooting. 4 others who would go in and do some shooting and leave before the cops got there. But she said it afterwards, so it might not be true. Now,
Okay. I've got stuff to do this morning, and this is about halfway through the video. I'm gonna come back later on in the day to finish up, but I'm gonna leave it at that. So on that note, I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you later. And please follow. I'm so close to getting to 1,000 followers. I'm at 896 or whatever it is total, and so that would be amazing. I'm really looking forward to getting to that number. So anyway, have a good day.